I'm Sharon Weisenbaum, and I'm so happy to be there in this first episode of a year-long series of short talks. And I want to heartily thank the American Acupuncture Council for hosting me to do this lecture. And let's go to the slides, and I'll tell you more about myself when we get there. Okay, so why classic formulas is the title of this lecture, and then we'll kind of go deeper throughout the whole year. And I personally have a dedication to and fascination with classic formulas, and I hope to inspire practitioners to delve into this more. So, why classic formulas? So, what we're going to do in this short lecture is first a little bit about me, and then answer the question, what does classical mean in terms of Chinese medicine, and what doesn't it mean, and what's special about being a classical herbalist? And we'll look at it as a way of seeing and also the formulas themselves. So, first, a little bit about me. I live on a farm in Western Massachusetts with a bunch of horses and dogs and goats and chickens and sheep. Um, and I am also the director of the White Pine Institute, which is an educational organization through which I teach the graduate mentorship program, a 2-year herbal training program that has a focus on classical herbal medicine. And I'm also the founder of and on the advisory board of an organization called the White Pine Circle, which is an educational membership organization that develops a lot of community around Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine. So I've been practicing for about 40 years now. I was in my early 20s when I graduated from acupuncture school, which was the New England School of Acupuncture in Massachusetts, long time ago. Okay, and here's just some of my influences. And I lived in mainland China for a little while and studied with Zhou Xiaomei and her main disciple, Dr. Chong Yufeng. And then these other doctors are all classic formula doctors. There's Feng Shilun, and all of these I've invited to teach here at the White Pine Institute. In fact, Dr. Fu Yanling there with a couple of our dogs is in front of our clinic and institute. Dr. Feng Shilun, Yu Guozhen, Dr. Huang Huang has come to study with him. And down below, some of my other deep influences, Andy Ellis, Eric Brand, Yaron Seidman. So that's a little bit of background about my training, my teachers. It's very broad. Um, okay, so this idea of the classics, I'm going to look at this character Jing a little bit, and that's the character for the word classical. And so let's look at this character and get an idea of what does classical actually mean? What does this character Jing mean? We know there's the Nei Jing, the Nan Jing, the I Jing, the Shenong Bansao Jing, and it's all this character that we translate usually as classical. So this character is made up of the silk radical, and the silk radical has to do with um, threads, and we have here these silkworms that are exuding these threads. And so here are some characters below that all have to do with thread-like things. So whenever you see this silk radical, which is in the character Jing, you know it has to do with lines and threads of things. And just to mention that the character Jing is also the character for channel, like in the channels in our bodies, the meridians. And so these, lines, these thread-like patternings. So this character has the silk radical in it. And the other part of the character is this character Jing. And Jing refers to the water rivers that flow beneath the earth. It is the water that flows in the dark underworld. So that's a quote from the Shouwen Jiezi, which is a Han Dynasty dictionary. So we have this idea of these threads that are flowing underground, like the meridians of our body, that are invisible to us, and yet they also give rise to the life that is visible. So we can think of the channels as underneath the skin, but also invisible. But the health of the channels has everything to do with what goes on the surface of the body that we can see. And we'll bring this back to these classical texts. Here, this Jing also has to do with the longitudinal, which is these vertical lines on the planet. So we have some sense of these lines being vertical. So we have, the human body, and the channels run almost exclusively vertically, not totally, because we have the channel of the dye vessel. But so we have some sense of this idea of vertical. Also, the character Jing, it refers to the warp of a weaving. We want to understand that the warp of a weaving is these lines that are there, that then when we go back and forth, the weft, that's where, again, the visible is, and the warp ends up being invisible. So we could say the Neijing is this Jing, this warp, these invisible lines, that this Jing, this classic, is connected to this tapestry of Chinese medicine that we understand today. There's so much that comes out of the classics, and the classics are sort of this underlying wisdom that perhaps was even received vertically from heaven, and this underlying intelligence that informs everything we know about Chinese medicine. So we talk about all kinds of acupuncture techniques and things like that, but it all goes back to the classics. So everything that I've studied, is connected to the classics. Everything we've all studied is connected to the classics in some way. So they're this uniting thread. So we could say that this character Jing is an information pathway that's coming vertically back and forth from and back to heaven. It's invisible, but it's the foundation for all that's visible. So I think that's very beautiful. And here are some other uses of the word, like the Neijing, the Nanjing, Shennong Bansao Jing, Tangye Jing, Dao De Jing, the I Jing, the Mai Jing, the Post Classic, and some other meanings of words that include the character Jing. We even have like the 6 confirmations, the Liu Jing, the warp of a weaving. And so I'm going to go on. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to kind of just run through. So here are some of these classics, what I consider classics. So the Shennong Bansao Jing is the classic that tells us all about the individual herbs. The mythical Tangye Jing is about the formulas, potentially. That's a book that doesn't exist, so we don't really know, but it's the decoction classic. The I Ching and the Neijing are talking about the principles underlying the method, the principles that underlie the method of acupuncture. And the method of acupuncture is expressed in the Nanjing. The method relating to herbs is in the Shanghan Zabing Lun. And so the Shanghan Zabing Lun, of course, is made up of the Shanghan Lun and the Jingui Yalai. And these are all from around the Han Dynasty or earlier. All of these books are, 1800 years old or more. So these I consider classical texts. And so in general, when we're talking about classics, we're talking about things that came from about 2,000 years ago as the foundation for what we're doing. So what is not classical are things that came much later. And, I know when I went to school that the idea of classics, it was very vague. And so you could consider anyone, oh, Li Dongyuan, the school of the spleen and stomach, that's classical, but actually that was so much later. The Wenbing texts weren't until the 1500s. Zhang Jingyue is modern compared to the classics. And, so all of these things came much later, and they're all built off of the classics. And all of these texts, the Wenbing texts that are written by a variety of people, Zhang Jingyue, Zhu Danqi, Li Dongyuan, they all um, they all knew the classics very well, and they extrapolated from them. And even things, that we think of as like using the master couple points for the Qijing Bamai, the extraordinary channels of the eight vessels, even those are, the master couple points weren't associated with the Bamai until about the 1500s. So a lot of these things are talked about as classical, and it's important, I think, to recognize that a lot of these are not classical. So for me, I don't consider the Wenbing texts as classical texts. They're rooted in the classical texts, but they really were not written about until much, much later. So, what is it about the classics that I love so much? And for me, the Neijing itself wasn't very accessible until I started to realize that it's about being right with cyclic time. That the whole idea of the Huangdi Neijing, the whole book, is telling us how to be right with time. And there's getting up in the morning and going to sleep, following the movement of the apparent movement of the sun around the earth. This, that it's talking about these various expressions of time in relation to space, and that health is being right with that. And what happens when you're not right with it? What happens if, the sun comes up, it's 7 in the morning, but I wake up at 3 in the morning. In other words, my body is going too fast for time, or, I am meant to poop every day, but it takes me 3 days to poop. Like my body's going too slow for time. So health is always seen as what is our relationship to these rhythms in time. Everything from the pulse to the breath to the digestion to waking and sleeping are all about being right with time. Illness is about not being right with time. So this is a view of the body and of health, of illness, and also of what to do about illness. And so when you start looking through things from the classical perspective, this is what I really love so much, is looking at my patients, looking at the world through this perspective of being right with time. And so here's a nice picture of this like rotation of yin yang, which is about all of the ways that time is moving inside of our bodies, and we have this relationship with nature, and that health is about being right with those rhythms, and that our healing gestures are about helping people align with the natural world around them. So if you start with this perspective, then you look at the Huangdi Neijing, which is kind of our foundational theoretical text. All kinds of things start to make sense about that text, what it's actually talking about. That sounds sort of like gibberish if you don't have this perspective. So once you have this perspective, it starts to be like, wow, what they're talking about is so profound and so useful. So time is something we attune to and align with. It's always cycling and managing everything. How do we attune to it? First, by orienting ourselves with time and space within the center of our own bodies, our own beings. Only then can we feel this great turning, how it's working in our bodies, and we can start to see it in other people. And this is the perspective that working from the classics offers us. for me. And here's a picture of, this is the yellow emperor in the middle. And you can see that the yellow emperor is facing south as Chipo instructs us. He says the sage faces south. And what that means is that if you want to be a sage, you should face south. And once you face south, you can see here's Huangdi facing south, and that means he's facing the red phoenix here. And look at what's on Huangdi's right is the white tiger. And so if you're facing south, you might notice that the white tiger is going to be the west direction, and the green dragon is going to be in the eastern direction. And what is going to be behind you is the north, which is the black turtle. Now, you might notice that these white tiger and green dragon are the names of herbal formulas. And so if you take this perspective and start reading the Shanghanluan through this perspective, you start seeing that these formulas are designed to establish right relationship with the directions. So I'll give you an example. If we have this blue-green dragon decoction, Xiao Qing Long Tang. And what is the direction of the east? The direction of the east is it's Taiyang, the great yang. It's supposed to bring the yang up and out. So what if you don't have a good relationship with the eastern direction? You're not going to go up and out and bring all this warmth up and out in your body. So your relationship with the eastern direction is your body is actually going too slow. And what do? You get cold because that yang isn't rising in you. So what do you do about it? You bring in the pungent hot ingredients of the minor blue-green dragon decoction. And that pungent warmth, it's not just that it expels cold from your body, which it does, but it also reestablishes your right relationship with the movement of the East. So that's just an example. And for me, when I kind of discovered this cyclic relationship with the Shanghanluan, it was like a domino effect. Like all of the ideas about the confirmation started to fall into place, like boom, 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 boom. Like now I understand what these formulas are doing. So I want to really offer this beautiful perspective, and that when we start seeing in this way, we're using formulas to reestablish the person's right relationship with nature. So this is kind of the world view of the classics. Later texts do not have this worldview very much at all. What happened was we started to be very separate from the universe. So we started to have the inside and the outside, like where pathogens are outside of me and they can get in me and I have to get them out of me. That view took much more precedence over time. So from a classical perspective, we don't exactly get rid of pathogens. It's our body's job to get rid of pathogens. And what we do with the herbs, and the classical formulas express this beautifully, is we reestablish the person's body function. So when I give Shaoqing Longtang, I'm reestablishing a function. And the result of that is that the cold pathogen is resolved. So from a classical perspective, we're never going around and trying to get rid of or kill any pathogens. We're reestablishing the body's function to do that for itself. And it's very powerful. So another aspect, I'm not sure where we are in time. I think we're just coming towards the end, and I'm open to any questions. But the other reason for why classical formulas, I hope I've inspired you a little bit with my enthusiasm for it. But another reason for it is that all of the formulas the architecture of the formulas are designed to reestablish this body function, and they work in a sort of lock and key kind of way. So what you find when you start looking at the body through this perspective and seeing the formulas is that when you get it right, when you see it correctly and you reestablish the function with the formula, that all kinds of things start to resolve automatically. And I'm going to stop my sharing here. Um, and, um, so rather than just going in to build chi or move chi or supplement the kidney, you're kind of going a step deeper into this invisible realm and reestablishing the function so that those organs start functioning well on their own. So there's often sort of a rather miraculous untying or resolving of issues, um, beyond just kind of going directly for the organ or directly going through the pathogen. So what I hope to do in this series is kind of go into some of these formulas and how they work, and you know, and each time sort of discussing this particular worldview and how the formulas fit in with that. And this is also, I want to mention the White Pine Circle, our membership organization, because there are many practitioners there that are teaching. Once you're a member, you so many wonderful little resources and workshops that also elaborate on some of these ideas. So I want to invite you guys to check that out. Um, all right, so that's it for my talk. And if there's anybody who would like to ask a question, I'm really happy to answer. Okay, I don't see any questions, but I will be back in a month and we'll probably be looking at one of my favorite formulas, which is Guizhi in that talk. Okay, thank you.